Alrighty. Today's meeting is going to be regarding the black vote, and at the end of the day, what is the black vote worth? Because we are coming to an election cycle where basically our candidates, we don't feel that it's one candidate that truly represents what we want to get across or our causes that we feel we want to be pushed out. So, I mean, the question then becomes, basically, what is the black vote worth, especially regarding this next election cycle? How could this change, the way people were elected going forward, period, in any election? And, I'm gonna start with you, Marcus, on this question and, just give me a little bit of feedback on what you feel the black vote is worth.
So, what I believe as far as what the black vote is worth, I mean, obviously, we have to get a stronger turnout as far as, how many people we have in our communities that are registered to vote and how many are willing to vote. As far as what it votes, I think it's kind of split into two parts. We have, obviously the national implications on who you're going to vote for president. And that voting has not had our interest in mind in several generations. So understanding that, it brings me to the second part of that, which is down ballot. Now, down ballot is very, very important because who we have representing specific areas, specific neighborhoods, who's the prosecutor, who's the sheriff, the judges, where judges are on certain things that we're looking for in our communities, where money gets spent, where do we put, where does money get allocated for our own tax dollars in our own community when we're getting federal money, where does it go, how does it work? Like all that down ballot stuff is more important now than it's ever been before. Having our vote count and actually getting these neighborhoods and getting our areas represented, because we sat back and allowed gerrymandering to happen. And so that it takes so many more of our votes just to swing something these days. We have to recognize that that's what our problem is now and be able to get be able to get that back and to be able to have our vote be as valuable as a suburban vote and as a behind a gated community vote. Because that's the reason why they're getting all the things that they want and the reason that we're not. And we have to recognize that and start pushing towards that. And as far as the direct answer to the question, our vote right now, it's worth a lot more down ballot than it is at the top of the ticket, but it's increasing in value. And the more that people like us are waking up and the more we can reach other people through forums like this, the more valuable it will become. It's not as valuable as it should be yet, but we are on our way.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Marcus. And Devon, I'd like for you to talk a little bit on that too, as far as what you feel from your perspective.
Mm-hmm. I would agree in most aspects of that. I do believe that our vote across the board really is more effective and more immediately effective locally, just because, like you said, you're going to see those changes and those people, the prosecutors, the judges, constables. Those are the people you're going to probably have more interaction with in the legal precedents more often than the presidential or your national elections. I would say what tells me how important our vote is when these elections happen and we do or we don't. That's one of the main talking points of a lot of the media companies and even the candidates. They mention how little or how much the black vote occurred during that election sessions, and that was the point of the main topic of discussion when Trump got elected the first time, was that look how many black people didn't vote. And on one hand, some people may not condone that, and on the other hand, you may understand it because of the fact that, just like you were saying previously, we haven't had a candidate in quite some time, if ever, that had the best interest or any interest towards the black community at all. It was maybe a little bit of pandering just to kind of get us on their side. And then once they got elected, they just kind of went towards their own narrative. One thing I did notice, or I did hear, maybe from Killer Mike or David Banner or some person to that effect, was that they mentioned our vote is probably going to be as strong as our dollar. If we decide to come back as a people or come together as a people and invest in each other and decided to, for lack of a better term, pay for these politicians, they will be more inclined to try to put in some of the policies and things that we may need in terms of our agenda a lot more when we're funding their campaign. Most of these laws and um, laws and rules that are being put in place are put in place that because they're being funded with an agenda by some hidden power or by some community. So I feel like, of course, because of our sheer number and our dollar that we do spend in other communities, our vote is important, but it could be exponentially more important if we came together and decided to push or put our dollar behind so many or certain politicians, let them know what our agenda is, and then we could use that dollar as a strength to hold them accountable for if it doesn't happen or if it doesn't happen as fast as we need to. So,
Yes, sir, most definitely. So my next question then becomes, and this is back to you, Devon, if you'd like to pick it up, uh, why do you feel that people don't vote? I mean, especially within the minority communities, especially I know our younger generation, a lot of my friends, a lot of people I know personally, they always go, well, I'm just not going to vote, period, because I don't agree with this person or that person. And I don't feel like that's, helping out what we're trying to get going either. So, why do you feel people don't vote? And I mean, how are some ways we could change that?
I'd say I speaking from someone who's been on both sides where I voted and chose not to vote. I would say it's mostly just because, of course, it's the narrative that you feel that your vote doesn't matter, no matter who you vote for. It's not really gonna, in the grand scheme of things, it's not gonna affect much, which that's been proven to not be true necessarily. But I feel like of course, it's the voice, and it's also just the lack of information, just understanding that you don't necessarily voting doesn't necessarily always have to deal with primarily the presidential campaign. It can be more effective locally, and if a lot of people or a lot of the younger generation were more informed on how detailed that is and how often that works in terms of you being able to change the judges, which can change your state laws and your local county laws and regulations, I think people would probably vote more. So to summarize, I would say it's more just a lack of information and just that powerlessness that is advertised throughout the media that your vote only matters if you're in this specific bracket, but if it doesn't, or if you're not, then you could vote for whoever, and the electoral college is going to kind of supersede everything that you do. When that can be the case in the presidential election, just not in that local standpoint. So I would say information, um, and just reinforcing that the examples to just give someone a real life perspective of, okay, not only am I going to tell you your vote matters, I'm going to show you an example of what happens to prove that it matters. What happens when you don't vote in your local area or in your bubble, and then what happens when you do, and how you can change that, how fast it can happen. So I would say that. And with the younger generation, of course, we're impatient. So we feel like if it's not going to happen immediately, it's not going to happen at all. So that's just a learning curve that we as the younger generation kind of have to get over.
Yes, sir. And now, Mark, I'm gonna ask you the same question. How do you feel from your perspective on why people, do or don't vote, and what could we do to get more people voting within the minority community, whether they necessarily agree spot on with what that candidate has, but I mean that might be something that sways a whole election, on our behalf, and that candidate might end up coming in to be able to assist us with a lot of things we would like to get done.
Right. So I think the first problem, and it's the catch-all that fixes all problems. It's education. A lot of people don't know how elections actually work. They don't know on the national level how their vote influences a representative's district, which represents an electoral vote, which can change an outcome of a national election. They also don't understand how the proposals work and how the down ballot stuff and how important that stuff is all the way down on the ground level. Whenever we're trying to change something, we're looking at a triangle of things that we have to battle against in order to get there. And people have been able to use this triangle for generations to make voting seem really unimportant. Those three things are gerrymandering, redrawing districts and making sure that it takes more of your vote in your area to count versus fewer votes in this area. So you can feel very simply like your vote didn't matter because you went to go vote, and all the people you know went to go vote. Your friends at work went to go vote, and the interest that you were voting for didn't pass because this neighborhood over here had a stronger representation of, and that, you know, the population difference between the two, and it can just disenfranchise you. The second part of that triangle is financial disenfranchisement. There is such there's no money being spent in our areas. There's no investment being done in these areas. And that feeling of hopelessness is pervasive. It goes through everything. And it is like, well, no one's going to do anything. No one's going to do anything anyway. Why would I vote? Why would I vote? Why would I bother? Right. And then the third part of that is interest representation. One of the big differences between what we are doing and what we've done traditionally versus what some of these other richer neighborhoods have done, when something doesn't go their way, it doesn't just go away. That attention span isn't immediate and it isn't short. They seize on it. They seize on it. They were preparing for what they were going to do about Barack Obama being elected the day after he got elected. Yep. And they spent years preparing, getting people in place, having people that represented their interests set up. Those people were backed financially, they were backed through influence, and when it was time for their election, they slid right in. That is a tactic and a method that we have got to understand and adopt. That's the best, you know, like that's one of the those things put together is why so many people feel like their vote doesn't even matter, because you're battling uphill and they don't know how this whole thing works. You know, they're suppressed by cheap messaging. They're suppressed by the rules and moving districts and things like that around. They're suppressed by not having their interests represented. They're suppressed by not having finances coming into their areas in the first place, so they see nothing change in where they live. And it all kind of combines, this, you know, for this feeling of hopelessness. Like, why do I bother? It doesn't matter. That's why people feel that way.
If you don't mind me jumping in to kind of piggyback off of that, it's like you said, it's the importance of feeling like what you do is going to have an impact. That's going to be the main thing for sure, is making sure people understand, like, hey, it may not seem like it right away, but if you give it just a little time, if you put the right people in the right position at the right time, like they did right after the Obama or during the Obama administration, it's going to pay off. You just kind of have to see the forest for the trees, through the trees when you're working towards that goal. And a lot of people kind of focus on, like I said, the national election and who's the face of the country, which, yeah, right now we're in a position where it's kind of a pick your poison type of situation. But to avoid that, we have to start at the local level and start smaller and build our way up, because these people that we're putting in that local situation, which empowers us, if we know, hey, this person that I voted in this local seat eventually kind of graduated their way to the Senate and was able to get into these higher positions to where now the changes that we wanted to see maybe 5 years ago is starting to get kind of put in place. So it's a combination of understanding how important your vote can be, and then being patient enough to see it through over an extended period of time.
Yes, sir. So, I mean, I'm going to make a highlight of this currently. I know the census, I mean, because this is currently on what Mark was actually talking about, you know, with the gerrymandering and, you know, the certain lines and stuff. And then, I mean, it does, you know, affect our vote and the way our vote is counted. But, I mean, on top of that, I know a lot of people feel like, oh, well, I'm not going to do the census this year. The census is just, you know, it's not important. But this is why even it's 2020. This census is going to be one of the most important censuses, you know, in the past 100 years per se, because this is going to determine, you know, going on into the future, you know, how certain votes are counted and, you know, how certain areas are basically their votes are accumulated. So, I mean, right. I do push for everybody to do the census this year and make sure, you know, your vote does make a difference by you being a number accounted for, a person accounted for within our society. So, I mean, my next question, I mean, this question is open to anybody on the call here. You know, what would it take for somebody who's running this year to get your vote? Like, what would sway you? What would something maybe they could say or, you know, policy that they could put forth, specifically, gravitated towards the minority community and helping the minority community would sway your vote, that you would say, you know what, I might vote for that person? What would change for somebody?
Well, I'll jump in first. For me personally, there are two trains of thought: the immediate and what I would actually want. The immediate is, as Trey said earlier, it is a kind of a pick your poison kind of election. And right now, the poison is basically a choice between cigarette and cyanide. We've kind of seen how the last 3.5 years have gone. That needs to stop right now. And I'm not, and of course, I'm not saying that Biden is for the black community. That man signed the crime bill. But I know that man is cigarettes. And I know cigarettes is better than cyanide. So that's the immediate kind of voting interest when it comes to the right now. As far as what I'm looking for and what would sway my vote, I can tell you right now, if we had the type of investment into our community and the type of investment into our education and our well-being that we put into how we treat oil companies, into how we treat the military, if we could invest to our people and understand that our people are the foundation of everything else that we're trying to do when it comes to running a country. We're trying to compete on the world stage. We're trying to compete economically. We're trying to compete financially. And we do that best when you invest in people. That was something that they actually understood. When you go and look after, before World War II, when the New Deal started and they started building highways and bridges and things like that, a project that, by the way, we've never attempted again since. Although it wasn't necessarily specifically for us and for minorities, it was meant to get people moving. People got education where they were working, and people were able to get things moving, and they invested in people and invested in the foundation. It gave us an infrastructure that put us so far above what the rest of the world was doing that it gave us a position that we still hold today. It is going to take that type of investment on a smaller level, on a minority level, to be able to pull us up to where we need to be. Like we're looking for those things. We're looking for sustainability. We're looking for a way for a millionaire to be, for a black man to become a millionaire without going to a sports team or winning a lottery, being able to build all the way up. And whether it's through investing to where you have a way out and you have a way to be, to become more than what you are and be equal, that's what we're looking for. So if someone were actually looking to invest in that, if someone were actually looking to take a budget and say, hey, this entire, we're trying to invest in our public school system. We need our public school system to be able to compete with our private school system. We need our kids to be able to come out of a neighborhood college ready, educated, ready to compete in the marketplace. If someone were willing to be able to put that on the table, that can get my vote. If we're willing to do something about criminal justice reform, real criminal justice reform, not a promise to review, not a promise to look at it. What is there to look at? We've seen it. We know it. We know what this is. There needs to be an investment. And how do you get that sort of racial element out of the criminal justice system? How do you get it out of the police? How do you get it out of the prosecutor's office? How do you get it out of the public defense office? What are our judges doing? Are we reviewing them? Do we have term limits on these people? Can we review them and give them the same report card that we can give our politicians? Like, I need to hear some stuff like that. That's the sort of thing that can get my vote.
Yes, sir. Divine or Heather, would you guys like to comment on that end?
Yeah, I would wholeheartedly agree. Actually, I kind of think on in terms of what we may need on that same level, whether it's what's going to be something that can have an immediate impact and what can benefit me personally. And I would say the same thing. Just the communities I'm growing up in and just moving around and working in clearly don't have the attention financially or economically that they should, as being a part of a major city, especially like Houston. With You would think that there's a certain level of a standard that needs to be upheld across the board, and it's not, in terms of education, the funding needed for that education and things of that nature. When you think of teachers, they're constantly required to work overtime without pay, to constantly have to come out of their pockets just to try to give kids a basic lesson, not even that they can take into life, but a basic lesson that they can get to the next grade so a quota is met. So if there were things, or there were someone that had that focus on the real attention of, hey, let's get our kids more educated, and not only how to pass a standardized test, but to help them manage their finances, to be able to learn how to vote, and understand what districts and counties actually mean, um, both on paper and in the general sense, and also how to be able to be productive members of society, like you said, without necessarily feeling like you have to be successful or be a millionaire. You have to be an entertainer in some capacity. If we could put more effort, emphasis, and money, of course, into that education, having people understand and even seeing it, that you don't necessarily have to go to basketball practice to be successful. Let's take you into a business course. Let's show you how you can be an entrepreneur, because not the college route isn't for everyone. And there's not a guarantee that just because, and that's what I feel like personally, what things are being portrayed now through the media and politics and politicians, is that if you go to college or follow this specific route, this is the way to get successful. And we should kind of go back to that. Hey, there's a bunch of ways you can make a living and contribute to society. Let me give you some avenues to educate yourself, and parents, let me give you an avenue to apply for these scenarios without necessarily having to put yourself in a world of debt just to get an opportunity. So I think if a politician was able to come out, one of the candidates, and advocate for that, understanding what especially the Black community's plight is about the fairness of accountability in the social view with policing, and the education system with making sure things are even in terms of the funding, and the backing for our teachers, that would stand out to me, and that person would definitely get my vote.
Most definitely, yes, sir. And now, Heather, how do you feel that we could what do you feel that someone who is running, a candidate that is running this year, could do to possibly, you feel from your perspective, to help a minority community or minority communities in general to push and advance us with a level of equality that we are trying to reach?
That's a great question, and thank you for asking. I appreciate everyone's comments on this, and I truly have learned a lot so far. I know, Cole, when we spoke, my goal in helping people is educating people, and I think it was Marcus that also said the financial education, and you and I spoke about how important educating people about finances and understanding money and those sorts of things are for all people. It's the education that most people are not given. And I think that's vitally important, because to understand politics, you have to understand how finances and money and the world works. As far as candidates go, personally, I think what I'd like to see is some honesty and integrity on both sides. I'd like to know genuinely what candidates have truly done. And my concern is we've got so many differing viewpoints on differing news channels and that sort of thing, but I'd like an accurate accounting of what people have done for specific projects, for specific groups, whether they be ethnic or whether they be financially based. What have they done to help lift those communities up? And to see what that's done, because I believe actions speak a whole lot louder than words, especially during political years when there are major, you see a lot of pandering to various groups of promises of we're going to do this and that sort of thing, but they never come to fruition. So for me, it's about what have you truly done in the past? What have the results been? And let's take that and realize that, okay, you've got something to stand behind what you're saying for what you are proposing you'll do in the future. And that in my point, that basically I think it comes from educating people, looking at the big picture, what has actually been done, what could be done in the future.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. And now, Marcus, I want to ask you personally, how do you feel the leader of our country affects the morale in the Black community?
I think it has I think it actually can have a profound impact, but I believe you only get one shot. I think the disenfranchisement that, for the Black community on the national level is so profound and so deep that when someone goes onto that national stage to be the face of the country, and you turn to, what it is that you're going to do, what is your agenda, we are listening. We're listening, and we're listening early. And you can tell very quickly whether or not you're included, whether or not you're going to be a part of the grand plan. If there's an hour-long speech and what the minorities' interests are maybe relegated to a sentence or two in minute 58 of that hour-long speech, you already know that you're not a priority, you're not on the burner, and you can go ahead and check out now. Because the bottom line is, until money is out of politics, money is electing people. And when money is threatened, you get a new person. So when we get these people in office, it really, you need to hear what their agenda is going to be. Because although they don't always live up to them, they will take a swing at their agendas, because it's going to come back to haunt them if they don't try. So it really does come down to what are we seeing out of these candidates, and when somebody actually hits that point and they get into office, what do we hear from them? What do we hear about? I think there was a pretty strong support for Barack Obama when he first got elected, not just because he was Black, of course, it did have something to do with it, but on top of that, the message was of growth and of hope immediately and initially. So, we gave it time. We gave it okay, look, let's see what we get from that. Now, of course, the realities kick in, and realities are always undercut an agenda any day of the week, but you could tell from that. Now go back to Trump's inauguration speech. We weren't even in it. So we knew what the deal was there. So you get that sense up front and early on where you stand as a community, period, on how you're going to be, on how the agenda's rolled out.
Yes, sir. Devon, would you like to comment on that end?
Yeah, just to add in onto it, I agree with it for sure. It's definitely the current climate amongst politicians nowadays is more so. I'm gonna just appeal to my base, who I know who I know is going to be on my side regardless, because they're a Democrat or because they're Republican or because they happen to be from where I'm from and they're fans of me. And it's with the Black community, because we have a history of not holding our candidates feet to the fire when they promise us something and don't deliver. It's become almost a foregone conclusion where we know who the Black people are going to vote for. They're going to go vote Democrat because their family did. They don't really do research, so there's no reason to appeal to them, and we don't put them in the positions to where they should feel like it. I think if we decided to, and of course that's going to come with education, but if we as a community and as a people nationally decided to not only do our research enough to vote for a specific candidate, but also continue to hold them accountable throughout their term, and constantly question their motives and make sure that they know that, hey, I have to do every single thing that I'm promising or I'm gonna be out of here. That's when things are gonna change. And just like I said, with money, that's essentially where a lot of these candidates are coming from. It's not gonna be a matter of, is this person the best person for the country? Does this person have enough financial backing to promote itself or travel enough to get in front of people to sell what he looks like, essentially, or sell this image of what they think a president should be, which ironically used to be how the original presidents were voted in. Because of the lack of information, they voted on what you look like, how you spoke when you were in front of your constituency, and that was pretty much it. It wasn't about following through on your policies or being held accountable for anything that you may or may not do. It was the physical appearance and your vocal projection. And I think that's kind of what we're getting back to, instead of making sure we stay on top of things and holding these people accountable regardless of who they are to you or to the other people. If we just start to put things in place to let them know, hey, we mean business, and if you don't do what we need you to do, what we put you in office for, you won't see any drop of a dollar from us in terms of support going forward, no matter what you do.
Yes, sir. That's
Hey,
awesome.
can I jump in on that real quick? Because that actually,
Yes, sir.
that actually brings up another thing. That is, I think, the reason, and the most powerful reason at that, as to why a real new third party needs to be formed. Our current two-party system is overly tribalistic. Because we've allowed money to infect all politics. You used to not get paid for this. If you go back to the beginning, you used to not get paid to govern. It was a part of your actual day job. I mean, you had a day job and then you did this on the side. And when you did that, and when money wasn't involved, you only governed on principle. That was the reason why they were able to get stuff done back then. It's a money thing now, and it's tribalistic, and it's all about playing to a base. It's all about tribe, and it's all about you're either with us or against us. The problem with independents is independents tend to be all about themselves. So they come in, they have no fanfare, they don't have the backing, and even though they could have really, really good ideas, it doesn't have the kind of momentum that you need in order to go up against the two-headed machine of the two-party system. To have a legitimate named third party that actually would have a minority interest involved, where we can go into neighborhoods where you do a rally for that. You're not doing it in some stadium. You're doing it on a street corner in the neighborhoods of the people that you're talking to, and you can actually get some real momentum that way. You might actually be able to challenge that machine. So I think that the kind of golden goose for us is not necessarily with Democrat or with Republican. Both have done their evil in their time. They kind of flip positions sometimes depending on what the financial interests are. But the bottom line is none of those interests have been our interests. So we got to look at that and see exactly how it is we can actually begin to get a foothold of our own, because there's momentum to do that. If it can be caught in the right way and we can get that first little foothold, we can actually begin to build on that and actually have something to be able to say, this is our platform, this is what we're looking to do, get on board with this, and we can just hold to it, because the growth from that, especially in this age of the internet, can be grown a lot better without mega corporations behind you.
Absolutely.
Yes, sir. Well, I just want to take the moment and I want to again promote, please. I know it's August 1st, I believe I'm not sure if it's the deadline date but it's the most important date showing currently as far as the Census 2020. I believe it's something similar to the deadline date. So I just want to make sure that everybody who's listening to the recording and everybody who's online with us right now, make sure that you're counted for this year, because it's going to be very important for all of us going forward with our ideas and our views to make sure that our votes are being counted correctly. So I just want to promote again, please take care of your census, and please make sure, you fill out your form that they do send in the mail there. And I just want to thank everyone for being a part of this meeting again this week. And it's been awesome. I've learned a lot, and I hope everybody has learned something that they can take away from it. And, with the recording, I hope that people, can also learn something from the recording and our discussion that we went over today. And, I would like to have more people next week come with their opinions on, different topics, so that we can continue to recondition our communities starting right here, at a base level, because it does start with our conversations, because conversations become ideas that then become bills and policies that actually are in place and get passed. So we have to start with the conversations first. And this is, it's becoming something amazing to me. Every week I'm learning something more myself, so thank you guys again. And, I'm going to conclude the meeting on that note.
Cool. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, take care.
Most definitely.
Thank you.